Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Filippo and I'm an analyst at Coresight. I'm here today with Andrea, Chief Marketing Officer at Celect. Celect is a provider of predictive analytics for inventory optimization. Also with us we have Deborah, CEO and founder at Coresight Research. Coresight Research is an advisory research firm focusing on the intersection between retail and technology. So this is the program today. We will talk through our presentation about how retailers can minimize the cost of poor inventory management. This presentation is the results of our research that we conducted among key retail industry leaders. The presentation will be followed by a conversation between Deborah and Andrea that will provide further insight on what we are going to discuss today during the presentation with real-life examples of how retailers can actually improve their inventory management skills. And following that, there will be a Q&A session with myself and Andrea. So before starting, I would just quickly introduce Coresight Research and Celect. So Coresight Research, as I said, we are a firm that focuses on the intersection between retail and technology, and we provide strategic advisory, retail analysis. We organize events to put in touch like members of our communities, and we also provide programs tailored to innovative startups to raise their company's profile and also to put them in touch with our network of clients among, for instance, the retail industry that wants to take advantage of the innovation that these startups can actually bring to their business. So these are the sectors that we cover. Of course, we are very focused on retail and consumer engagement technology, but also we are focusing on fashion, beauty, footwear, food and drugs, supply chain, and consumer trends. A quick introduction about Celect. Celect is a predictive analytics platform that helps retailers to optimize their inventories through data-driven decision. And this solution take advantage from the latest optimization technology, including machine learning. And these are just some examples that you can see on the slides of the company Celect is working with. So let's start with our presentation. We will go through the impact of markdowns on US non-grocery retail. So this is the main finding of the survey that we ran among key industry leaders in the retail industry in the US. So from the results of our surveys, we actually estimated that about 60% of non-grocery retail sales were made at full price in the US in 2018. So this leaves like 40% that was made not at full price. And the cost of these missed full price sales is equal to $300 billion just in 2018. And this is equal to 12% of the total US non-grocery retail sales, which is lost in markdown in 2018. So we ask the companies that we actually interrogated for the surveys, what are the main factors that actually prevents them to sell at full price. And we calculated how these factors actually contributes towards that 300 billion figures that we've seen before. And we could see that the main single factor that accounts for 31.1% is the fact that external factors are actually preventing retailers to sell at full price. But the major contribution is actually inventory misjudgment, because this is a combination of different factors, such as overbuying inventory, buying the wrong type of products. So these are actually factors that can be actually controlled to a certain extent by the retailers with better analytics tools. We also found out by running our surveys that the more sophisticated, the more complex are retail operations, the more it's difficult to actually sell at full price. As you can see from the chart, about half of the retailers that we interrogated can actually sell between 70% and 100%. but this percentage goes down to just 28.5% when we actually focus on the results of the responses only from multi-channel retailers. Among the factors that are actually having the biggest impact on the ability to sell at full price, so what are the perceived barriers to selling at full price for our respondents? Again, it's inventory misjudgment, that is the combination of buying the wrong type of products or overbuying inventories that actually affect more the ability of retailers to actually sell at full price. The single most significant factors is the impact of external factors with 36%, but then the total of inventory misjudgment factors is actually 49.5%. And again, this is a factor that can actually be improved dramatically with the right tool to do so, to better manage inventory decisions. So we were wondering why it's so difficult in the current retail environment to actually sell at full price. And this is because, as you can see in this representation, the retail environment is becoming extremely complex. There is a greater competitive pressure from a number of other retailers in the industry that range from pure online players to multi-channel retailers. This is reflected also in the fact that shoppers have multiple channels to choose where to shop from. The rise of the digital online shopping actually generated way more data that can be an asset, but can be also a problem for companies that don't have the tools to actually use those data properly. Shoppers are also becoming more demanding because they have more choice, and it's more difficult to actually influence the trends. And also there is more promotion because there's a constant environment in which there is one promotion after the other due to the enormous competitive pressure that there is among retailers. So when we analyze what are the external factors that are actually impacting more on the ability of retailers to sell at full price, the key factor is actually, according to our respondents, is the competition. So 59.5% of respondents, they say that the most important external factors is actually competition, but also the greater consumer choice of where to buy and the greater unpredictability and volatility of consumer demand is also a big factor for retailers that needs to take into account. When we are actually considering other factors that are not external, so factors that can be actually controlled by retailers through better analytics tools, we've seen that overbuying inventory is by far the largest factor. It's 43% of our respondents, and underbuying inventory is 36% of one of the causes of that our respondents actually have chosen. So by compiling all these factors, we can see that 59% of respondents have challenges with getting the quantity right. So again, this is something that can be actually highly improved with the right tools. And during the survey, we actually asked our respondents what kind of tools they actually use to inform their inventory management decisions. And we found out that the one that relies on basic data entry and manual input tools, such as, for instance, simple spreadsheets, they actually have an higher impact of the challenges that we saw before compared to the average of respondents. So, for instance, as you can see under buying inventory, it's 49.5% of a challenge for respondents that they rely on basic data entry tools, while it's just 36% for the average of respondents. We also ask in what sectors our respondents are actually operating within retail, and we focus in particular on the apparel sectors because we believe that apparel retailers actually they have different priorities compared to other retailers because of the very competitive environment in which they operate. And in fact, we found out that among the factors that are of higher priority for apparel retailers, we have buying the wrong type of products. It's actually perceived by our respondents among apparel retailers as a bigger challenges than the average of the respondents. So we can see that 37.1% among apparel retailers, they actually answer that buying the wrong type of products is actually a challenge versus just 26% of the average of our respondents. On the other hand, we can see that overbuying inventory is more of a challenge for the average of our respondents. So for instance, also it could be a challenge for respondents in grocery retailers, in grocery retailing, while it's not so much of a challenge for apparel retailers. Also, another interesting finding of the survey is the fact that speed to market, or the need to get product to the market quickly, it's very important as a factor for apparel retailers versus the average of respondents. As you can see, 42.9% of respondents among apparel retailers actually answer that this is a key priority versus just 26.5% among the overall respondents. Also, another external pressure that affects more apparel retailers than the average is the greater consumer choice of where to buy, because consumers now buying apparel items can actually buy online, can actually buy from multi-channel retailers. So the greatest choice is actually an external factor that is impacting the ability of retailers to sell at full price. So we also ask our respondents how advanced analytics can actually help. And we found out that 86% of our responses believe that advanced analytics is actually very helpful to inform their operation, their inventory management decisions. And in particular, the most popular application of advanced analytics that our respondents indicated was how much stocks to buy. So buying the right quantity can be something that advanced analytics can actually help with. But also some more specific application in retail, such as planning promotional schedules or understanding the best products to actually sell on markdowns, or buying the right type of products is also another factor that advanced analytics can actually give a boost to the effectiveness of the inventory management decision. So the key insight of our presentation, just to conclude this part, is that inventory misjudgment and external factors cause markdown cost. We've seen our 300 billion figures of revenue that have been lost through markdown sales in 2018 among US non-grocery retailers. Overbuying and underbuying inventory are key challenges for full price sell-through for our respondents. Basic analytics and management tools are not enough. Actually, they can be an obstacle to overcome these challenges. Buying the wrong type of products and speed to markets are the key priorities for apparel retailers, and we could see that most retailers think that advanced analytics can actually improve their retail and management operations. So this is the final part of the presentation. In the next section, we will have a conversation between Deborah and Andrea that will provide further insight on and specific case studies of how advanced analytics can actually help in inventory management decision. I will hand it over to Deborah for this part.
Thanks, Filippo, and Andrea, excited to engage with you in a few questions. So I think to start, we've obviously seen that markdowns are very expensive for retailers, I think costing almost $300 billion in 2018. Inventory misjudgments have been identified in our survey as the main cause of missed full price sales. In your opinion, how can advanced analytics help retailers formulate better inventory decisions?
Yeah, Deborah, I think, one of the things that we see is if you look across the inventory life cycle, there's three big areas that inventory optimization really helps with. And I think Urban Outfitters is a really great example to talk about. It's one of our customers that actually addresses all three of these use cases. So the first one is really, what and how much to buy. So as you guys saw, obviously, in the survey that you did, that it becomes a big question. So that's the first area. The second area is actually once you have the inventory, where to place it. Because, if you have a better idea of what's going to sell where, you can really look at how do I drive better full price sell-through. And then the third is for those retailers who are actually doing store fulfillment for online orders out of their stores themselves, because here again is another opportunity of where you can go and look at how do you prevent or avoid markdowns and lost sales. So those are sort of the three big areas that we're seeing. And just in general, there's really some great benefits. And if you look at it typically we're seeing in these three use cases about a 6 to 8% reduction in lost sales. And, for the markdown avoidance, that's a really big swing, the 25 to 50% increase in markdown avoidance. And then obviously from a full price sell-through, 2 to 5% improvements.
Andrea, I think you bring up something very important, which is this fulfillment optimization, or BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store, which retailers have found to be incredibly helpful in terms of optimizing inventory, but can be very challenging. Can you talk about how Select's inventory optimization suite helps with that?
Yeah, sure. It's actually really at the core of what we do, because the first thing that we look at is really around getting to a true consumer demand. So the only way to really get to a true consumer demand is really to understand their preference for shopping. So we understand very location specific, what's going to come from walk-in demand, what's going to come from buy online, pick up in the store or other location, and then of course the home delivery side. And then that becomes the core of everything that we do and look at across the life cycle. So that's really how we sort of think about it. And then we have sort of specific solutions, one really around fulfillment optimization itself. So we do have a large number of retailers who are using that to say, instead of just looking at it from a cost and time perspective, if I know what I'm going to sell where, how do I make sure that I avoid any markdowns or lost sales?
Thanks. And the retail environment continues to become increasingly challenging. And as we saw from our survey, retailers are facing external pressures such as strong competition, more choice for shoppers of where to buy, and certainly more volatile consumer demand. Based on the experience from the companies you're working with, can you give an example of how advanced analytics are helping retailers stay ahead of the competition?
Yeah, and I know it sounds really simple, but almost the number one thing that our customers are looking at is just making sure that they have the right inventory and the right product in the stores themselves. And so one of the examples of that would be Lucky. So they're actually looking at this in two different ways. So the first one is, like we were talking about earlier, how do you actually really understand the location-specific demand that takes into account both the walk-in sales as well as buy online, pick up in store? So, and then secondly to that is really then to start to understand, making sure you have the right product. And there's really a shift from moving from allocating one product at a time to actually thinking about all the products that have to be allocated out and thinking of them more from an assortment or a portfolio perspective, and looking at that time how things are selling and using that as a basis of driving what goes into the store. So really coming down to basics of how do I make sure that I have the right inventory in the right places.
Andrea, you talk about this idea of getting back to basics, and I think so many times we're looking at this idea of bright, shiny objects. I mean, increasing full price sell-through is really the holy grail. Can you talk about your experience with Lucky and how they've, if there's been any changes in the organization, or if it's just been more changes in process and procedure?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there was really around a couple of things. So one was it's process and procedure, because when they've gone in and typically when they do allocations previously, like many of retailers out there, they would look at just doing things for a store group and at the average level. So here they're actually able to go down to the specific demand for a particular store, and And then secondly, like I was saying earlier, the other process change that they had is, typically in allocation, you'll go in, you'll pull one product at a time, and then you try and allocate that product. And here, basically, what they now are able to do is to look at this for a whole group of products at a time, and they kind of call it shuffle the deck, so that they can truly understand if I need to send something to the store. Do I send based on what the plan was previously, or do I shift to a better approach, which is really saying what do I now know more about in terms of selling? So those are sort of some of the key areas. And just in general, what we're seeing when we look at allocation, we're seeing a 2 to 5% increase in full price sell-through, and there's something between sort of 4 and 12% improvement in, I want to call it the allocation variance, but it's really having this, the right amount of receipts and sales.
Can you, I would say, dive into a little bit further this idea of allocation variance, and how does that differ from, if you think about the different retailers that you've worked with, and is there, kind of more science than art around that?
Yeah, sure. So I think if you look at the core of it, it comes back down to, like I was saying earlier, really trying to understand better what's going to sell where, and really doing things like understanding what are the attributes that are best going to help shape that. So those are some kind of key areas. And then when I was talking about the actual variance, really what I'm talking about here is if you understand how much you're going to sell, making sure that we have receipts aligned in the right way. Because, if you look at some of the more traditional ways of doing allocation, you're looking at history and you're looking at it for a store group at a time, you're looking at averages. So you're really not understanding the true, how much is really going to sell there, and definitely not taking into account the buy online, pick up at store element of all of this.
Thanks. And so we've seen that most retailers are aware of the improvements that advanced analytics tools can bring to the business, and that those relying on basic tools such as spreadsheet are more likely to face greater challenges. Can you share an example of how the transition from basic to advanced analytics has improved the operations of companies Select is working with? And what were the recurring issues they were facing, and what was the impact of the adoption of advanced analytics on their operations?
Okay, I think a really good example here is Aldo. So Aldo, the challenge that they had is they want to do store fulfillment, so they want to be able to fulfill online orders from the stores themselves. And so, one of the key pieces here was really having then the ability to understand and move from a rules-based to more advanced analytics. So if you think about how many people are doing some of the store fulfillment side today, they're using the typical rules in order management. So those rules are typically cost-based. They might take into account sort of a weeks on hand and just making sure that they hit the time frame. So really the opportunity for advanced analytics is to be able to say, to look at the opportunity cost of whether I'm going to be able to sell something through at full price, or if it's going to go to a markdown or force a lost sale. So there, what you're able to do is you're able to look at multiple different objectives and to do that in the most optimal way. So that's really what they're doing. They moved from this rule-based approach to using advanced analytics. And because it's right at the execution time and you're plugging into your order management system, it's a very easy adoption cycle for the business users themselves. And actually, they saw a 6-to-1 ROI improvement, which was really great to hear. And they were also got seven-digit improvements in margin.
So you talk about this quote-unquote easy adoption cycle. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So if you think about, as I was saying, like on the order management side, so this is where this is really going to tie in. A lot of this is rules-based, and it runs sort of automatically in the background, and people are sort of monitoring how and where things are going and more the exceptions. So when you plug in advanced analytics, it just brings the next level to that. So now you're getting to much more optimal solutions. And I think, the big thing here is it's running automatically. You can actually then start to measure the improvements of what would have happened versus what did. So, typically when you're looking at any type of adoption, the more that you can show the value the better off it's going to be. So, that's, I guess, a big part of the adoption cycle.
And then is there anything as we're thinking about kind of conversion opportunity resulting from, ship from store volume, how do we think about that from retailers as a result of working with Celect?
Yes, I think in terms of improvements.
Correct.
Yeah, so in terms of performance, I think the biggest thing here is, well, there's a couple of things. So one is this avoidance of markdown. The second one is avoidance of lost sales, and hence sort of a better full price sell-through. But then also typically you're also seeing something on the cost side as well. We see 10 to 15% improvements in cost. But a lot of that depends on the strategy, because some of our customers will actually say, I don't necessarily want to reduce the cost. I would rather improve the customer service by getting something to them earlier. So, some of this is really around the strategy, which are the levers you're going to pull. But we always see improvements in terms of lost sales and markdown avoidance.
Great. So apparel retailers obviously face unique challenges, and anticipating what shoppers want for the upcoming season, and I would say a increasingly improving greater speed to market. So can you give an example of how advanced analytics are helping apparel retailers to anticipate shoppers' trends and to improve speed to market based on the experience of the companies Celect is working with?
Yes, I think a good example to talk about here is Aeropostale. I mean, we at Select pretty much specialize in sort of the shorter life, the fashion area. So we have almost every single one of our customers will have stories to tell around this. But in the Aeropostale example, really what they were trying to do is to look at what and how much to buy. So, really trying to make sure that they realized that they were overbought. So they wanted to look at what inventory, how can they reduce inventory but do it in a smarter way, and hence use us to help them with that. And very much it's an approach of looking at like the science along with the art side of it that they bring to the table. So it's a combination of the two that's really using to drive this. And some of the techniques I think that's interested in the background here is when you use things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, you have the ability to identify quickly and easily what are the most important data sets. So what trends are important? Is it online search that's important? Is it what's structured and unstructured data? And then once you have that, really starting to understand within that, what are the attributes or the characteristics that are most important in terms of how someone shops and their preferences. And then obviously layering on top of that again, the ability to take a look at not an individual product, but the assortment, because when you go in to buy something, you always have to take into account what was around there. So almost this idea of the choice that they had and how does that influence how much they're going to buy, the customer's going to buy.
So I think along that, right, the holy grail has always been if retailers can take, the characteristics or the attributes of what successfully sold for them and utilize that to help them, plan future inventories. Can you talk about how through AI and ML, Select is helping retailers approach that?
Yeah, sure. So, if you look at the algorithms that we have, really that's at the core of what they're doing. So the first thing that they'll do is you can feed in a number of data sets. And what's nice is, you can start with a simple data set, or you can actually add to that. And as you get more data sets, you can add to it. So the first piece is really not having to actually predefine what is the most important data set. So I think that's the first piece that AI and ML help with. The second piece is, typically what retailers have had to do in the past is to say, well, these are the attributes that are important, or these are the attributes. But a lot of people don't have all of the attributes necessarily in one place. So with AI and ML, you can actually identify what the attributes are, because everything now has an online description, so you can tease that out of the data. And then once you have some of that, you can then go back and say, which ones are actually really driving the choices. So those are the things that AI and ML can really help with. And I think what's good is that it's not a static model either. So you continue to learn over time and things change over time. So you're able to take that into account.
So we very much talked about the science. From an art perspective, you work with so many retailers and you've obviously helped them so much in terms of top line and bottom line. What forum do you get them together or enhance their abilities to communicate with each other to maybe address some of the challenges that they're facing in the market today?
Yeah, so we work very closely with obviously all of our customers because they help shape where we take the product going forward. And we do actually have a forum where we bring people together to understand what. So we had one I think November or December last year, and we'll have one that's coming up again this year where we bring people together to make sure that there's open dialogue on the types of challenges that they are experiencing. And I think one of the things that we always talk about is really things like adoption, because obviously the closer that you are to execution, the easier the adoption is. But as you get into some of the processes that are more planning or sorting oriented, there it's very much a blend of both the science and the art.
Andrea, thank you so much for answering all of my questions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Filippo and Andrea to handle the questions from the audience.
Thanks, Deborah.
Hello, sorry about that. So thanks, Deborah and Andrea, about the interesting conversation. In this part of the webinar, we are going to take your question, the question that you've been sending through during the presentation and during the conversation between Deborah and Andrea. And it would be myself and Andrea that will answer it. So let's see, the first questions that we have is for Andrea. And Andrea, you are asked how long does it take? How long does implementation typically take? Hello? So let me see, it looks like we have a problem. I'm not sure if Andrea can actually hear us, so I'll proceed with another question. So this question is for Coresight Research, so it's for myself. And we are asked if multi-channel retailers, since multi-channel retailers have now an abundance of shoppers' data, why they can just use this data to avoid markups, for instance. And yes, in practice, the reason is because the application of digital technology in retail is relatively new, and many retailers, especially legacy retailers, don't have the capabilities in-house to make use of this data. So the availability of data occurs if the retailers cannot actually use this data properly to gather the right insight. This is also something that transpires from our presentation, in which we've seen that basic analytics tools, users of basic analytics tools, they even encounter harder times with certain challenges that are shared among the retailers that have answered our survey. So this is a reason why you cannot always rely on raw data, but you have to make use of the right tools to actually make sense of this data. Andrea, can you hear me?
Yes, Filippo, I think, can you hear me okay? Sorry, I think we were having some audio issues there. Would you mind just asking me this question again?
Yeah, we had a question for you before. How long does implementation typically take?
Okay, so it very much depends on which of the solutions that you're implementing, but it's really between 2 and 6 months. It's a relatively easy implementation, and there's really 3 steps to it. So the first step is really understanding the business, the goals, and how you work today and want to work in the future. The second step is really around collecting the data and then running the models. And then the final step is just the implementation, some training, and the integration, because obviously everything that we do it plugs into your existing planning or execution system. So again, 2 to 6 months, and you're typically seeing some ROI relatively quickly after that.
Okay, so I'm reading also other questions that we received. And there's another question for you. What if we have lots of missing data or poor attribution?
Okay. Well, what we find is that you don't really need perfect data to get started. So I know that's a question that a lot of people ask. Well, I don't have a full data strategy, or I'm missing data. So, you really don't need that. We do have a number of customers who don't have very good attribution. So the good thing about all of this is that the models that we have can be used to actually identify attributes. So if you think about it, almost every product that you have has some type of online description, etc. So we are able to identify attributes from the data and these online descriptions. And then the other piece that's really nice as well is that, you could start with a relatively simple set of data, still see good results, and then as more data sets become available, so whether that's something like your online search or some additional trends, that can be added in. And as you add it in, what the models then do, they'll take a look and see how relevant and significant that data is, and then update the models accordingly. So yes, you can start without having perfect data in place.
Okay, then we have another question. This is for myself. What are the current consumer trends that makes it harder to sell at full price? So basically, this is something that we briefly talk about during the presentation. In practice, is the fact that consumers now are more demanding, and it's harder to influence them. They expect a constant discount environment. They actually gather shopping ideas from different sources, such as social media. So let's say that it's a combination of factors that make it harder for retailers to predict what is the trends they're going to influence more shoppers, especially in apparel retail. And as such, really technology is something that we've seen applied in retail. Is something that really serves retailers to actually manage to create that connection with the shoppers, to engage with the shoppers, and to be able to better understand what possibly the trends could be, but also to be able to influence them and to try to respond to their request. Let's see if we have other questions. So there's another one for you, Andrea. It's the question says, what if we already have a traditional order management system in place, for instance, like IBM Sterling or Manhattan Associates?
Okay, yeah, so if you have an order management system in place, that's absolutely fine, because our fulfillment optimization actually plugs into existing order management systems. So today, an order management system has a set of rules that they use to say which store is the best store to fulfill from. And those rules are typically, can only really understand 1 or 2 objectives, so it's mainly sort of cost and time based. So what we then do is we integrate the Select fulfillment optimization into the order management system, and then we'll kind of do the smarts of what is the best store to fulfill from based on things like the consumer demand. So where would, which store would have the right inventory to actually go after this based on what you think you'd need to, what you'd be selling, walk in, buy online, pick up in store, and then obviously for the online orders themselves. So in fact, we really need an order management system to be in place and plug into that.
Okay, so I think we are about to run, yeah, we're running out of time. So sorry if we couldn't answer all the questions, but as you can see, we have our contacts on the screen. So thanks, Andrea, for your intervention. Thanks, Deborah, as well, for the conversation with Andrea. So this leads us to the end of the webinar. And thanks to our great audience and to all the questions, to all the insightful questions that you've been sent through. And have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.